You lean back against the curve of the yak chal wall, letting your hand trail along the surface. It's not smooth, not exactly, more like textured parchment baked in sun and shadow. Outside, the desert wind hums softly, threading through the narrow vent shafts. You're still underground, wrapped in silence and dry chill, and above your head, the enormous conical dome looms like an upside-down teacup made of dust and miracles. Let's talk about the shape for a second, because yes, it looks peculiar. But this shape, this strange geometric elegance, is no accident. The inverted dome design wasn't picked just because it made the Yakchal look like a sleeping beehive. It actually controlled airflow in ways that even modern architects admit is kind of brilliant. Hot air enters from the bottom and rises out the top. Cold air, heavier and denser, sinks down and gets trapped where the ice is stored. So, basically, this whole giant structure acts like a passive cooling system. No fans, no wires, no button marked on, just physics and patience. You begin to walk a spiral route up the gently sloping tunnel that leads back to the surface. Your steps echo faintly, and the walls, several feet thick, muffle every sound from the outside world. You might as well be in a wool sock lined with desert engineering. As you crest the entryway, you notice something you missed earlier. Rows of shallow trenches carved into the earth just beyond the building. They look like irrigation ditches, but they're far too shallow, barely ankle deep. They aren't meant to feed crops, they're designed to freeze water. Here's the trick. In winter, Persian ice harvesters would fill these little pools at night with water from underground aquifers or nearby qanats. Don't worry, we'll get to those soon. And because the desert sky loses heat like a sieve at night, no clouds, low humidity, the water in those trenches would freeze into thin sheets by dawn. The surface ice would be carefully scooped up and carried into the Yakchal before the sun had a chance to wake up and ruin everything. Over time, they'd pile those thin layers into thicker slabs inside the ice pit. Bit by bit, a mountain of ice would grow underground, made not in some factory, but by hand, moonlight, and desert air. And remember, this is the desert. You're not supposed to be able to make ice here. This is where thermometers go to sweat. Historians still argue whether the technique of freezing water in shallow trays at night was borrowed from earlier Mesopotamian methods, or whether it emerged independently in Persia. Either way, it worked, and the system became so reliable that even towns far from snowy mountains could enjoy a summer ice cube in their sour cherry syrup. As you wander farther from the Yakchal, the silence of the desert night begins to shift. Somewhere in the distance, a water wheel creaks. A donkey brays half-heartedly. You pass a clay brick wall studded with shards of turquoise tile, once part of a garden, perhaps, or a nobleman's villa. And then you see another one. Another Yakchal, a little smaller than the first. They weren't lone structures, it turns out. In cities like Yazd, Kerman, and Isfahan, multiple Yakchals were built, each serving a different family, district, or trade. Some were public, maintained by the city, others were private, sealed off behind dusty courtyards with wooden doors and locks forged by firelight. At the height of the Achaemenid Empire, think 500 BCE or so, Yakchals had already become institutional. Persia had trade routes stretching from Greece to India, and while gold and silk get most of the spotlight, it was the ice that earned gasps in the summer months. Can you imagine? You're a sweaty merchant fresh from the Silk Road, trudging into Persepolis with sand stuck in your teeth, and someone offers you a bowl of snow-chilled melon. That's not just hospitality, that's sorcery. There's even fringe speculation that ice was shipped short distances along cooler nighttime trade routes, wrapped in straw or burlap, stored in sealed ceramic jars. It wasn't efficient, of course, but for a king's table or an elite banquet, totally worth it. You walk past what's left of an old water depot, a collapsed structure half swallowed by sand with a dry cistern at its heart. Near the rubble, someone's carved a faint symbol into the stone, a stylized sun with droplets beneath it. Maybe a mark of ownership. Maybe graffiti from someone who once guarded the ice pit. The moon is high now. Your steps grow slower. There's something comforting about how much care went into cooling a place down, like people worked with the desert instead of constantly fighting it. Not a war of heat and cold, but more of a clever negotiation. And then there's the mystery of the builders themselves. Who exactly built these? Sure, architects drew the plans, but who shaped the bricks? Who mixed the saroge with lime and egg whites under the blinding sun? Some records mention skilled laborers trained in cooling craft, a term that sounds made up but definitely isn't. Others suggest enslaved people were used for the back-breaking digging and hauling, another reminder that even clever history has its shadows. Still, the knowledge they left behind is weirdly intimate. These weren't just cold storage units. They were part of the rhythm of life, refilling the trenches, patching the outer dome, rotating the ice for optimal preservation. You'd almost think they loved their jobs until you remember one little detail. These ice makers often worked at night, by torchlight, in total silence, so that the heat of the day wouldn't undo their work. Kind of like you now, wandering in darkness, listening to stories, letting the desert breathe around you.